The biggest lie in professional golf goes like this. At the end of the day, it's all about the game. If that were true, we wouldn't have two rival tours, we wouldn't have Twitter wars, and we definitely wouldn't have players calling each other hypocrites, sellouts, or puppets. We'd have one tour, one schedule, one ranking system. Instead, we've got this: PGA Tour versus LIV Golf, and a multi-billion-dollar power struggle that's been trying to save itself for 2 years and just keeps sinking deeper into the bunker. Picture this: you're sitting at home watching golf, majors on the calendar, stacked leaderboards, the usual drama on Sundays. But in the background, there's this constant rumor. The big deal is coming. They're going to reunite everything. Politicians get involved, investors get involved. People who've never held a club in their life suddenly talk about golf, just because of the money on the table. And then right now, two of the most prominent faces on each side step up and basically say, forget it. This is going to be very, very difficult. Rory McIlroy, for years the moral voice of the PGA Tour, and Bryson DeChambeau, LIV's loudest and most polarizing star, suddenly sound deflated, almost tired. Not "we're working on it," not "we're close," but stuck, entrenched. Too many demands, not enough compromise. One side says, "We want to come back together." The other side, between the lines, says, "But not at any price." In this video, we're going to break down why what was sold as the Great Peace Treaty in golf has turned into something more like a messy divorce. We'll talk about who's really pulling the strings behind the scenes and why the very players who benefited the most from this war are now the ones sounding the alarm. And at the end, we'll ask the one question nobody really wants to say out loud. Does golf even need this mega deal anymore? Or is everyone secretly quite happy with this chaos? Let's start with the basics. Officially, it's been about 2 years since the so-called framework agreement between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf was announced. 2 years of talks, progress, task forces, conference calls, lawyers, term sheets. And still, a true reunification of professional golf feels further away than ever, at least if you listen to the top stars on both sides. On the surface, everything almost looks normal. The PGA Tour has its tournaments, with prize funds bigger than ever. LIV has its events, loud music, team names, a very different vibe. At the majors, the two worlds collide for a week and then drift apart again. But under the surface, it's still grinding and cracking. And right in the middle of that is Rory McIlroy, ironically the guy who has been one of the loudest voices saying, "We need to put this back together." In an interview at the CNBC CEO Council Forum in the US, Rory's not sitting on the range in a polo shirt. He's on stage in a suit, talking business, politics, long-term strategy. And what he says there doesn't sound like a man who thinks a deal is just around the corner. He basically admits, for golf as a whole, for fans, for the product, a unified system would absolutely be better. One tour, or at least one coherent structure, clearer rankings, cleaner schedules, less confusion. But after everything that's happened over the last few years, he thinks it's going to be very hard to get there. You can hear the frustration baked into that sentence. Rory is not just any player. At the start of the LIV era, he became the unofficial spokesperson for the PGA Tour. He was the one defending the tour in press conferences, criticizing players who left, drawing a line between those who stayed and those who took the money. For a lot of fans, he wasn't just a great player, he was the conscience of the sport. And then comes a turning point. Earlier this year at the Genesis Invitational, Rory suddenly sounds much more pragmatic. He says we have to put our disagreements aside, that whether you stayed on the PGA Tour or signed with LIV, everyone has benefited financially. He flat out admits they're playing for a $20 million purse that week, a figure that simply wouldn't be on the table without LIV's pressure. It's almost like he's saying, look, we can't pretend this didn't change the business. We're all richer because of this fight. But that honesty has a bitter edge to it. Rory says we need to stop looking backwards, stop obsessing over who was loyal, who sold out, who stayed true. What happened, happened. It was ugly, it was regrettable, but it's done. The real question is, how do we bring this back together and move forward? The problem, while he's saying that for the cameras, behind closed doors the lines aren't really moving. And on the other side of the trench, there's Bryson DeChambeau. one of LIV's biggest names, a two-time US Open champion, a walking golf science experiment, and, like it or not, one of the league's main public faces. In an interview with FOX News, Bryson doesn't really sugarcoat it either. He says there's no real hope for a quick deal at the moment. His logic is brutally simple. Both sides want too much and are willing to give up too little. One side wants power and control over the product, the other side wants recognition, security, and influence. Everybody has demands. Almost nobody wants to sacrifice anything. Bryson talks about the whole thing being stuck. And that's exactly what it feels like. Endless wish lists, tiny concessions, lots of talking points. But no one is really prepared to be the first to blink. Everyone is rich, everyone is important, everyone has lawyers and advisors whispering in their ear. And in the middle of all that, the sport itself, the thing everyone claims to care about most. At the same time, there are very real reasons why a unification would make sense. The split has created chaos, divided fields, watered-down leaderboards at certain events, confused fans who don't know where their favorite players are teeing it up, traditional tournaments losing star power. LIV players have paid the price in sporting terms. No world ranking points, complicated paths into majors, very little sense of history or legacy attached to their schedule. But financially, they've all won. Guaranteed contracts, massive signing bonuses, team equity. It's a different universe. Rory summarized it pretty ruthlessly back in February. Without LIV, today's prize money levels on the PGA Tour simply wouldn't exist. Even the guys who stayed loyal are now benefiting from the money LIV forced into the system. That's the dark joke of this whole thing. Each side has spent years attacking the other's morality, while both sides end up cashing bigger checks. It gets even more interesting when you look at how this year unfolded. Early on, it really felt like things were moving. Reports of serious talks, of drafts being exchanged, of structural ideas floating around. Who gets a seat on what board? What could joint events look like? How might LIV teams be integrated into a bigger ecosystem someday? For a while, it sounded like the two worlds were closer than ever. Then March hits, and suddenly you hear about disagreements and roadblocks. Behind the scenes, the core interests collide head-on. One side doesn't want LIV to exist as a fully independent tour alongside the PGA Tour in the long run. The other side refuses to just be absorbed or downgraded into a side project. From that moment on, the noise level drops. No big joint pressers, no clear updates. Just isolated comments from players like Rory and Bryson. While all of that is simmering in the background, LIV makes a move that feels like a quiet statement of intent. The league commits to evolving itself further as a standalone product, not just a disruptor, but a proper tour. They want world ranking points in the long term. They're shifting toward a 72-hole format, 4 days, the traditional structure everyone knows from the big tours. That's more than a cosmetic change. It's LIV saying, we're not a gimmick. We're a real global tour. Treat us like one. Bryson, who somehow manages to sound both critical and optimistic, calls the whole situation a positive upheaval. He insists he doesn't want to speak for others, but he believes the game itself will improve over time because of this disruption. He says it'll take a while for the dust to settle, for everyone to get back to something like a perfect scenario. But that, in the long run, it will be good for golf. And that's where the real irony hits. All of them, Rory, Bryson, the PGA Tour, LIV, are essentially saying the same three things. This will take time, it's complicated, and it might actually be good in the long run. But while everyone points off into this vague, better future, the present just sits there. We're not seeing big waves of new defections anymore. The shock factor is gone, but the structural fracture is still absolutely real. Two worlds, two systems, two narratives about what real golf even is. So what does that actually mean? On one side, you've got Rory McIlroy, who has accepted that the money game can't be put back in the box. He admits everyone has benefited financially, but he also knows the politics, the hurt feelings, the headlines of the last few years make it incredibly hard to sit down and rebuild trust. On the other side, you've got Bryson DeChambeau, who bluntly states that both sides want too much and give too little, but still believes that this chaos could be a catalyst, that the sport might come out of this stronger if everyone can just survive the turbulence. And somewhere in the middle is you, the fan. You just want stacked fields, clear structures, the best players in the same tournaments more than a few times a year. Instead, you get statements, interviews, vague talk of ongoing discussions, and two superstars essentially telling you, don't expect a happy ending anytime soon. So we're left with one big question, and I'm throwing it straight to you. Do you actually believe we'll see a reunified golf world in a few years? One true global ecosystem where Rory, Bryson, and everyone else share the same leaderboard without political baggage attached to every tee time? Or has this golf war already become the new normal, and that big, shiny mega deal everyone keeps talking about is just a PR ghost that nobody truly needs anymore? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Does golf need this reunion, or has the sport already adapted to two separate worlds? If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our deep, sometimes uncomfortable dives into the power games and personalities behind professional golf. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep it in the fairway.